Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to some people. Welcome to week 15 of CYBV 473 Violet Python. So this is our last actual lecture for the course. This is our last lecture for the course. And this week, we'll be talking about machine learning. We'll also go over the assignment for last week, and then I'll also talk about the final. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into the assignment for last week. Last week, you had to utilize some code, actually interact with VirusTotal and submit some some items to VirusTotal, and then have a report that spits out. So in running this, I'm going to, up above, I have my key. I'm going to print out that this is a VirusTotal scanner. I have my target folder. I'm then going to get the items in that folder. I'll loop through each one of the items, grabbing the actual full path. I'll open that item up as a binary. I'll read the contents. I'll then get the hash of that item. I'll call upon my VirusTotal public API, specify my API key variable, and my API key is up here. I'll create a instance or an object called VT. I'll call upon VT with a method of get file report. This is where I'll specify my hash, and then what I'll get back is my response containing that data for my report. So I'll go ahead and run this. And I have a breakpoint there at the end. And just like that, I'm getting that information. Nothing more, nothing less. So let me pause here. Let me see if we have any questions about it. Okay. Okay, so no, nothing heard. All right, so as we talk about machine learning, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about artificial intelligence as well. And really, when we look at this, the items are both up and coming, and really some would argue have been used already in our field. And the truth be told is that is actually pretty true. Machine learning itself, well, very data science driven, seeks to allow the machine to build upon what it currently knows. And for some, we kind of start off not necessarily telling it what it can't do. We just tell it some of the things that it should do, and then let it build upon there for what it does next. Now, when we look at this and we think about, well, what language, if you will, from a programming perspective, does one usually utilize for building machine learning type capabilities? Well, generally speaking, one is going to use Python. And believe it or not, Python is really at the cutting edge of that. As you can imagine, with the libraries that are inherent, the third-party libraries, and Python being an all-around, pretty easy language to understand, it certainly is the go-to de facto for the field. So when we think about, okay, well, what about artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence is largely still being done in PowerPoint. And I say that jokingly, but also seriously, right? So from the perspective of being able to utilize things like natural intelligence and really being able to hone in on robotics and things that are being controlled by other items, to include just various tasks that require some form of human intelligence. So from a machine learning perspective, we have really the term or terminology definition associated with it. And this was really originally thought of by Arthur Samuel, right? From the IBM Journal of Research and Development. This is back in 1959. So we're talking about some time. His research really stemmed and focused on application of machine learning as it relies or relates to checkers. And what he ended up doing was creating two different instantiations of items that utilize machine learning to then have them play checkers against themselves. Now, we've moved on from that, and in some fairness, it still becomes an avenue in which people use to try to build upon machine learning. But really, in today's day and age, we think of it from our ability to learn without explicitly programming something, right? You allow it to build upon what it currently knows to then truly have a depth understanding of things that it could do, shouldn't do, things that don't feel right to it or have adverse, adverse results, if you will, based upon what it does do. Now, from the perspective of Python and machine learning tools, I already noted, and at this point that Python is certainly easy to learn. It's platform independent, so we can have it on a number of different platforms and also be able to utilize its functionality without losing a whole lot or of much of anything. It's open source, so our extensibility and granularity that's associated with the language and what we could do certainly has the ability to expand largely beyond what our wildest imagination could be. Community supported, so even where there's not something supported by the Python developers at the core themselves, by virtue of its easeability, its open sourceness, and the community's dedication to it, there's generally always going to be a library or module that is available to do what most everyone is looking to do. So the community support with it really is bar none. It's extensive libraries. So throughout this semester, we've used a number of libraries that truly extend our ability to do different things within Python. So from that perspective, from a machine learning perspective, we have NumPy, we have SciPy, Pandas, Scikit, NLTK, which you use just recently, a small part of it, and then the list kind of goes on and on. We can utilize Python from a visualization standpoint, and we'll kind of see how we can do that with some of these machine learning tools here shortly. So some key libraries. Well, I mentioned them. I kind of just went down the line of sorts, and there's a few other ones that I didn't just mention. However, we're going to talk about them. So what is NumPy? Well, at the core, it is certainly used for scientific computing. It allows us to take multi-dimensional arrays and utilize advanced mathematical processing algorithms. This certainly helps us improve our performance from a linear perspective. And when we think about this, we have something like this, right? We have hue angles that we retrieve from an image. And when we see the numbers in the cyan color, we see floats, essentially decimal represented numbers. Now, if we wanted to translate those or transform them all at one time, or if we wanted to do a period, we would generally think about, well, let's do a for loop or something to that nature to loop through it. However, we can utilize methods that already exist to deal with these types of numbers and be able to transform them in one large swoop to be able to get after what we need. Now, this is one example of many different things that we can do within NumPy. SciPy, well, from this perspective, not only is it another vital library, however, it allows us to convert large arrays into sparse matrices. So for example, we could get something like this, where we're still dealing with floats, but we have a mixture of numbers that are in there, and then we can transform those in one large swoop into structured data in another representation. Without something like this, we would find ourselves trying to manually shape these numbers and shift them and show them in such a way that makes sense for us, but we can utilize SciPy to be able to do that for us. Matplotlib. Okay, so now we get to the point where we can visualize this data, right? Visualization is always good, particularly if you've just become accustomed to utilizing something like Excel or something to be able to get your points across. But we can do this from a matrix perspective, histograms, scatter plots, the list kind of goes on, and we don't have to think too much about it. We have our numbers, whether they're actual integers or floats, and then we can call upon the appropriate methods. And in this case, in the end, utilize the show method and get an actual plot back associated with it. Now, this is one, as mentioned, of a few different data visualization capabilities just made available by Matplotlib. However, you see that we can take data represented as real numbers, floats, and turn that into different charts to get after our overall objective. We also have pandas, so short for panel data. This allows us to really visualize and understand data frames from a different level. We're talking about multi-layered spreadsheets, so we can then be able to filter, analyze, scrub, validate whatever data it is that we're looking at. The results here ultimately becomes data frames that we can utilize from a supervised or unsupervised perspective. So in the end, again, taking data in one representation, being able to convert that data or visualize, view that data in another form without having to manually make that transformation for us. Now, from the next perspective, we have Scikit. And here we have our perspective where we really get into supervised and unsupervised learning algorithms. And in a future slide, I'll talk a little bit more about supervised versus unsupervised. But we start to see all of these products that we're talking about, all these libraries that we've talked about thus far are truly key aspects to machine learning within Python. And all of this isn't necessarily saying these are end all be all, but there's some vital ones. Now, Scikit itself is generally used for classifications, right? So being able to classify different data, do regression testing associated with it, and be able to cluster and scrub different aspects of it is really where Scikit comes into play. That brings us to talking about supervised and unsupervised data. So from a supervised perspective, we'd have particular labels that we would actually apply to said data. We'd have an actual model. So that way the data has kind of its left and right limits or bounds, if you will. We would never see essentially new input that we hadn't looked at before, which then highlights, well, what would be unsupervised data? Well, in that case, the learning is certainly quite different. From a supervised perspective, we don't like surprises, right? So it's like you have some left and right limits. From an unsupervised perspective, there's no predetermined output. There's no guide or anything. It is just raw data, right? So the only input data that is provided is really select features for an example aspect. The algorithm itself is asked to extract knowledge from the data. How that extraction takes place or what the result of it would be, well, that is yet to be determined, and that's the unsupervised aspect of it all. So that brings us to some of the things that are use cases that are associated with this. Natural language, well, you got this from an NLTK perspective, being able to understand different aspects of it. We could also utilize NLTK against something like Twitter and be able to understand just off of a tweet, was there anger, was there happiness, was there sadness that is associated with it? Again, utilizing something like NLTK to do analysis of the words, the periodicity, how they're used in actual tweets. We can actually do something like that. We can identify photos and understand if it's what they call real fake or not. We can use it as a spam filter. We could also use it to comb through malware, not NLTK specifically, but just talking about the machine learning, different libraries and capabilities as a whole. And some of the user behavior stuff kind of goes back into NLTK. And not necessarily the methods that we talked about thus far. However, some of the other methods that are available within that module. So as we look to conclude here with 473, a lot of the things that we talked about from a machine learning perspective is really just scratching the surface. If your follow-on is going to be 474, Advanced Analytics for Security Operations, that's where you really start to get into it, where the focus is still on using Python, but from the perspective of artificial intelligence and more on machine learning, all being able to use those aspects from a real world perspective. Just like in this course, we were utilizing Python from a real life perspective in terms of some offensive techniques, a little bit of things that you can do from a defense perspective. Well, 474 will focus on Python from a more analytical perspective. So that brings us to the final project. So you're getting this a little bit early because I would normally make this visible at the conclusion of this week. However, you're going to get a little bit early. So it's your lucky day. Now, some of you might have seen something talking about the final project and what it entailed and all the other stuff, and may have had questions. I did not answer those questions at that time. I wanted to make sure everybody had equal playing ground, if you will. So I'm going to go over the final project right now and talk about what's needed throughout the semester. A lot of you have asked very pinpoint questions, and I've helped walk you to where you needed to be. Being that this is the final, you won't get that same level of attention. And it's not to say because I don't want it. Well, the reason is because this is the final, and it is to validate your understanding of concepts that have been talked about throughout the course. So your final script will require that you scrape the casl.website within Cyberopolis. So you have to be in Cyberopolis to be able to get that. Now, you will not follow any links that veer outside of Cyberopolis. That is a no-go. You want to stay within the bounds of Cyberopolis. You are allowed to use any standard library within Python or any third-party library that we've discussed during this course. If you start using libraries that I know we have not talked in here, I'm going to start deducting points because one, that highlights that you're probably not really building it. You're probably looking on the internet trying to grab specific things. And two, the idea is that I want to validate that the things that we talked about throughout the semester, you understand, and that's what you're using. So again, any standard Python library that's built in, or any third-party library that we've talked about during this course, you want to use one of those two things. Anything other than that, you're likely going to get some points deducted. Your script will need to generate a report that has the following information. What is that? The unique URLs of all pages found on the website. All pages found on the website. Unique URL links to images found on the website as well. You need to extract phone numbers found on the website. Okay. Notice how all of these things are focused on that website. You'll also need to extract all text content from each of the pages and store them in a single variable. So in your mind, probably some gears are shifting right now and how you're able to do that. You'll also look for items that are indicative of zip codes, and you're going to grab those as well. Thinking about your regex or regular expressions to be able to get you there. Now, for the next couple of items, you need to be utilizing NLTK to be able to process this information, right? So be cognizant of that. 6 through 8 need NLTK for that. You're going to list all the unique vocabulary found on the website. We've done this in the course. Possible verbs, possible nouns. You'll need to do a little bit of research in that, but you'll utilize NLTK for that. Now, what are you going to end up submitting? As always, you're going to submit your Python script, and then you're going to submit the full output of your script. Those two things. Okay. Let me pause here. Let me see if we have any questions.
And this might be opened. Is there a tab that's going to show like I don't see it under week, and this might be later. So I don't see it under week 15 or assignments. I guess, will that be ongoing, that will kind of be released for us?
I will release it when we're done here. You'll see it under assignments.
Sounds good.
But good question. Any other questions?
I had a question earlier. It's on the chat. It was from my script for last week. It ran through each of the file, but then it saved each of those reports as a separate file. Was that okay? Because from what it looked like from yours, it looked like it's ran all the script and saved all the reports as one file.
Yeah, no, I'm not a stickler for that. The big learning objective here, well, excuse me, that you could submit a request via API to VirusTotal and get that information back. If you're getting it back and you're sending it out to one file versus the 4 or 5, I'm not a stickler for that. You won't lose any points.
Okay. And I just also realized that I might have submitted my script with my API key on the script still.
Well, luckily for you, I'm an ethical person. I'm not going to do anything with it. However, I cannot account for the next person.
Gotcha.
Okay, so fair enough. I'm going to likely transcribe what I just said about the final project. I'm not going to do it word for word. However, there will be announcements about it where I'm driving in or driving home the points. I really want to make sure that people take heed to it. And I really want to validate that, what we've done throughout the course, you have, not really understood, but you're able to use those concepts given a specific task, right? I'd fully expect that each and every one of you would have to go back and do some form of research. That is understood. That is okay. I'm really trying to make sure that you all have it. If there are no other questions, then that concludes our last lecture for the semester.
So I got one more quick question. So I'm trying to access that website for the final assignment, the CALS website. What it took me to is like a CLS financial advisor. Is that the right website? Just to be sure.
Yeah, it redirected you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that's perfect.
Okay, I just want to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to be sure that it's like a financial website and that I'm not on the wrong website.
No, it's a fake financial website.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we don't there shouldn't be like any credentials for logging in except for that. We're just gonna browse through those individual web pages and just basically scrape through all of that and get all that information on our script.
Correct. Which is why it is incredibly important you stay in Cyberopolis. This is a fake financial website. If you get outside of Cyberopolis and you get to a different financial website, we can't account for that. You're probably doing it, off something real. So yeah, you're just using this fake site.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, we'll talk more, not verbally, but through through the D2L. I appreciate everybody's efforts this semester. Although we're not done, we're near the end. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, roadblocks. Again, I'll be less helpful in terms of the final. I will answer clarifying questions. I probably won't answer how do you do something, because largely all the things we've done throughout this semester. So,
And just real quick, you said so the assignment, like we said, I think we're gonna have like a week after this, like next Wednesday is usually when our assignments are due. It will most likely be the week after that, I guess. Is that
yeah, and that'll be
okay.
all in the
Cool.
instructions. It will close on the 10th.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Actually, let me look. I think it's the 10th. Sorry, it is. Yep, it's the 10th, midnight on the 10th. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thanks for joining in. Take care. We'll talk to you at another time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.